Imagine standing alone in the wild, surrounded by nothing but cold, fear, and uncertainty. A massive bear could have killed you, but it didn't. You saved its cub, and in return it spared you. But in the shadows, a real predator was waiting. Not an animal, but a man. A hunter, ready to strike the moment you stepped away. What would you do? Walk away and betray the mother bear? Or take the risk and challenge the hunter? She chose the second option. She did the impossible. She stepped toward the beast, and that step changed everything. Do you think she made the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story made you think, like the video and subscribe for more incredible stories about the wild and its untold secrets. The roar of the raging river was louder than the woman had expected. She had hoped to spend a quiet day by the water, shielding herself from the outside world. But instead, her heart pounded wildly when she noticed something struggling against the rushing current. At first, it looked like a log, helplessly floating downstream. But then she saw a tiny creature barely clinging to the surface. It was drowning, its little paws grasping at the air as the merciless water pulled it deeper. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew how dangerous it was to interfere with nature, how risky it was to approach a bear cub, especially when its mother was likely nearby. But the river was cold, cruel, and relentless. The cub wouldn't last long. Her hands trembled as she pulled off her heavy jacket. This was madness. No sane person would willingly throw themselves into the river for the sake of a wild animal. And yet, without hesitation, she ran to the shore. The icy wind bit through her clothes as she took a deep breath and dove into the freezing water. A violent shiver overtook her body, but summoning all her strength, she pushed forward, fighting against the powerful current. Every second counted. Her lungs burned as she struggled through the water. Just a little more, she urged herself. The cub was drifting farther away, its tiny body tumbling in the waves. She reached out with all her might and grabbed it. The little bear let out a weak, pitiful cry as she clutched its slippery body. Despite its small weight, it made swimming even harder. The river refused to let them go, and she gasped as water filled her mouth. Panic gripped her. If she had made a mistake, it was in not being strong enough to save the cub. Now they were both trapped by the current. And then, as if in answer to her silent plea, her foot struck something solid, a rock hidden beneath the churning water. Gathering every ounce of strength, she pushed off from it, using the momentum to propel herself toward the shore, still holding the trembling creature tightly. The world blurred around her as she struggled to stay afloat. Finally, by some miracle, her fingers grasped the muddy riverbank. Dragging herself and the cub out of the water, she gasped for air, while the tiny animal lay motionless in her arms. Her hands shook, but before she could even process what had just happened, she felt a presence. A shadow loomed over her. A deep, rumbling exhale sent a shiver down her spine. The mother bear was there. Her breath hitched as she slowly lifted her gaze. The bear was massive. Her thick, wet fur clung to her powerful frame, water still dripping from her enormous paws. The dark eyes of the beast were fixed on the cub in the woman's arms. Her heavy breathing was slow and steady. She had seen everything, every movement, every struggle, every desperate moment the woman had spent battling the river to save her baby. And now she stood just a few steps away. The woman was mere feet from the bear, feeling the air between them thicken with tension. She knew how this usually ended. A mother bear protecting her cub was one of the most dangerous creatures on the planet. People had died from her claws and teeth, from her unshakable instincts. An inner voice screamed at her to run, but her body refused to move. She still knelt in the mud, cradling the shivering cub to her chest. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the looming shadow. The bear stepped forward slowly, her massive paws sinking into the damp earth. The woman's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She was at her limit. Any sudden movement could end in disaster. Suddenly, the cub let out a weak, high-pitched sound. Its tiny body still trembled from the freezing water, and that sound, like a trigger, awakened something in the mother bear. The beast's muscles tensed, and for one terrifying second, The woman thought she was about to be attacked. But then, something unexpected happened. The bear did not lunge. She did not growl or swipe with her powerful claws. Instead, her eyes darted between the woman and her cub, as if assessing the situation, trying to understand what had just happened. The woman held her breath. Did the bear comprehend? Did she know that this human had just saved her child? The bear's nose twitched as she sniffed the air, her expression unreadable. The woman realized she had only a few seconds to act. Carefully, she loosened her grip on the cub, moving as gently as possible. Slowly, she raised her trembling hands and began to inch away, little by little. The moment stretched into eternity. The bear's dark eyes never left her, unblinking and indecipherable. But then, finally, the enormous creature lowered her head with a low, guttural sound. Not a growl, but something else, something softer. She nudged the cub with her broad snout, and the tiny bear let out a feeble whimper, weak, but alive. The mother bear sniffed him once, then again, before emitting a deep, throaty noise, a sound of reassurance and relief. The woman was still too close, still too near the immense power of the mother bear. But something had shifted. The air was no longer filled with only danger. There was something else. It wasn't quite trust, but rather recognition. The bear stepped forward and, to the woman's astonishment, gently licked the cub's wet fur, trying to warm him. She had never seen anything like it before. Instinct had told her to expect an attack, primal fury. But instead, she had witnessed something else. Something raw and emotional. Something deeply maternal. She had saved this cub's life, and now, standing before its mother, she felt the weight of that action settle between them. This wasn't gratitude in the way humans expressed it, but it was something just as ancient. Lost in thought, the woman remained still, barely daring to breathe. Slowly, she lifted her head. Their eyes met. Human and beast, predator and prey, two mothers, each in their own way. And then, the bear did something that made the woman shudder. She turned away, but not in the direction the woman expected. There was no dismissal in the motion, no disregard. It was something far more surprising. The bear had made a decision. She would not harm her. The moment was not yet over, because as the woman began to retreat, something unexpected happened. The bear moved too, but not away from her. The woman's body tensed as she saw the bear take a step toward her. This was wrong. Everything she had read and been taught told her that a mother bear turning her back was a sign of departure. But instead, she was approaching. The air felt thick with uncertainty. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't. Running would only trigger the bear's predatory instincts. Besides, her legs felt like stone, sinking into the muddy ground. She barely dared to blink as the massive creature slowly and deliberately drew closer. The bear's heavy paws pressed into the wet earth. The cub, still weak and trembling, let out another soft cry from behind. That sound made the mother pause for a moment, but then her focus returned to the woman. The woman's breath came in shallow gasps. The bear was too close now. She could see the tiny droplets of water clinging to its thick fur, the deep scars along its back and shoulders, marks of battles fought for survival in the merciless wild. The bear's nostrils flared as she took in the woman's scent. They were face to face. One swipe of those enormous claws could end everything. But the bear did not attack. She did not snarl or bare her teeth. Instead, she lowered her head, and her wet nose was suddenly inches from the woman's face. The woman trembled, every muscle in her body taut with anticipation. She knew the bear was smelling her, deciding whether she was friend or foe. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she waited. She heard a sound she hadn't expected. It wasn't a growl or a roar, but a low and resonant snort, almost contemplative. The woman didn't know what it meant, but she felt something shift in the air between them. The bear lingered for a moment longer, gazing at her with dark, unreadable eyes. Then, without warning, it turned and did what it was meant to do. It slowly retreated back to its cub, leaving the woman standing frozen, trying to comprehend what had just happened. She had just been spared. If the mother bear had realized, even on the most primitive level, that she had saved her cub, the thought would have been impossible, almost incomprehensible. The creature returned to its young and gently nudged it with its nose. A strange feeling washed over the woman. Something unspoken passed between them, not quite gratitude, not quite friendship, but something older, something primal. Her knees nearly gave way beneath her. The exhaustion from battling the river finally overwhelmed her. She had survived. She had done something reckless, almost suicidal, and yet she stood here, alive, in the presence of one of nature's greatest creations. But this wasn't the end. The mother bear had made her choice, but that didn't mean she would remain merciful forever. The woman needed to leave. Slowly, cautiously, she took a step back, then another. Her body ached from the river's brutal grip. Her skin was scraped raw and freezing. She had to go before the bear changed her mind. But just as she was about to leave, something happened that made her blood run cold. A shadow flickered among the trees, and she felt another presence watching her. Her breath caught in her throat as her gaze darted to the tree line. Something was there, a shape moving between the dense foliage. This presence was faint but unmistakably real. Her exhausted mind struggled to make sense of it. Another bear? No, the movement was different, more calculated, more human. She had spent all her energy worrying about the mother bear and preparing for an attack that never came. But now she realized she had let her guard down. She had focused on the wrong danger. The creature hiding behind the trees wasn't here to protect but to take advantage of the situation. It had the upper hand. It was a predator, a hunter, and it had been watching her all along. Her pulse quickened as she realized. It was a man. A dark figure stood just beyond the reach of the fading light, watching. His stillness, yet the sheer intent behind it, sent a chill down her spine. Sometimes hunters came to these lands, despite the rules and laws protecting the bears. Some hunted for trophies, others for fur. But they were all killers. They had one thing in common. They didn't care about life. Neither hers, nor the cubs, nor even the mother bears. And now, after everything she had endured, the freezing water, the suffocating fear, the incredible moment with the mother bear, she stood under the gaze of something even more dangerous. A man with a gun. She couldn't see the weapon yet, but she didn't need to. The way he lurked in the shadows without making a sound told her everything. He wasn't lost. He wasn't just passing through. He was waiting, and that realization made her stomach tighten with dread. Then it hit her. He was waiting for her to move, waiting for the bear to relax, to lower her guard and turn her back, so he could fire. The hunter hadn't just stumbled upon this opportunity. The mother bear had been protecting her cub, but for a brief moment, she had been distracted, vulnerable. And the woman, alone and drained, had unknowingly saved the cub. The hunter couldn't shoot while she was still standing there. Too close, too unpredictable. But if she stepped aside, he would take his shot. The mother bear wouldn't have time to react, and her cub wouldn't stand a chance. A sharp pain clenched the woman's heart. She had already saved the cub once. Could she let it die now? But what could she do? She was alone, unarmed, trapped. Her thoughts raced. She had to choose. Leave and doom the bears, or stay and risk becoming a target herself. Neither option was safe or fair. Then, suddenly, something clicked in her mind. Once, the bear had trusted her. Could it trust her again? A wild, impossible idea took form in her head. It was madness, it was dangerous, but it was the only thing she could do. She turned to the mother bear. Her body tensed before fear could stop her. She had mere seconds to do something so unexpected, so unnatural, that it could throw everything into chaos. And so, without hesitation, without a single moment of doubt, she stepped toward the bear. She walked forward with confidence, ignoring every instinct screaming at her to stop. She was approaching a wild predator, one that had every reason to see her as a threat. But now fear had no place. If she hesitated, if she faltered, all would be lost. The hunter, hidden in the trees, was waiting for her to make a mistake, to give him the opening he needed. The air between them was charged with something primal. The bear's eyes held no fear, only calculation. Would this human be a threat once more, or something entirely different? Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to remain calm. She needed to communicate something impossible, something words could never convey. She was not a predator. She was not a threat. She was something else entirely. The mother bear let out a deep, guttural sound that made the woman's chest vibrate. But she didn't stop. Moving slower now, deliberately, she lowered herself to her knees. It was a risk, a gamble based purely on instinct. Submitting to a wild beast made her vulnerable, but that was the point. She had to show that she wasn't here to challenge, to control, or to harm. She was here to protect. The bear tensed, its muscles coiling, nostrils flaring. And then the impossible happened. The creature exhaled slowly and turned its head. Not toward her, but toward the forest. It knew. It had sensed it just as she had. The hunter must have realized what was happening because suddenly, there was movement. A sharp rustle, the unmistakable snap of a branch underfoot. The moment was shattered. The predator had been exposed. The mother bear let out a thunderous roar, shaking the ground. Leaves rained down from the treetops, but she didn't charge. She didn't have to. The hunter had lost his chance. Mercifully, no shot rang out. Alert and furious, the mother bear had seen what she needed to see. The presence in the trees vanished, retreating swiftly into the forest. The predator had backed down. It was over as suddenly as it had begun. Slowly, cautiously, the woman rose to her feet. The bear still watched the trees, but her body was no longer coiled for attack. She had won, not with force or fear, but with something far stronger, trust. The cub let out a soft, uncertain whimper. The mother turned to it, lowering her massive head and nudging it gently with her nose. The woman heard a faint answering sound. The cub pressed into the thick fur of its mother. The mother bear had no more reason to stay. Her cub was safe. She was alive. The danger had passed. And without a sound, she turned, nudging her child forward, leading it back into the endless wilderness where they belonged. The woman stood and watched as they disappeared among the trees. Her heart at last was at peace. Despite all the fear, she had survived. And not just her, the bear had too. More than that, she had witnessed something few ever had, the brief but undeniable connection between the wild and the human world. This moment, this understanding, had changed her. She had saved a life, and in return, she had been saved. Sometimes, survival isn't about strength or dominance. It's about trust, respect, and the courage to stand firm, even when afraid. The bravest thing one can do is act with compassion.